going to try a bunch of these firm market combinations.
Yes.
But later in the 21st century, we would have converged on a few standard platform models that will mediate a significant fraction of the world's economic activity.
Yes.
And when I think about this, two questions that come up, and I hope we can sort of discuss them during the panel. One is this reorganization of economic activity going to exacerbate the inequality that we've seen growing, or will it be more equalizing? Will it actually be democratizing in an economic opportunity kind
And before
of way?
you move to the second question, what's your quick answer to that question? I realize this is an academic asking an academic, and we're in dangerous turf.
I know, but the simple answer is that I'm an optimist. I think that there is tremendous equalizing potential as we start to, and what Susan and Nate sort of pointed to already sort of alludes to that answer, right? I mean, people who wouldn't have otherwise had access to a global market now do. You're empowering the individual to sort of build a small business.
But now, channel a sociologist or a pessimist, if there's any lack of overlap between the two, and tell us what would be an example of it exacerbating.
Well, there may be a fear that as the network effects continue to sort of reinforce the dominance of a single platform in an industry, that perhaps that platform is now in a position to sort of capture a lot of the value that flows through it. I mean, that's the argument that's given. I find this argument fallacious because the kinds of platforms that, these platforms depend very heavily on their continued brand, the delivery of a high quality experience on the providers. And so it's smarter for them to view the providers as partners, as sort of part of a community rather than as, sort of inputs to sort of extract rents from.
So your hope would be the market would police. Let's get your second question on the table before we move on.
Okay, and the second question, and this comes up repeatedly, this comes up most significantly in Nate's world with Airbnb and with Uber and with Lyft. But I see a blurring of lines between platforms and regulators, or between the role of the platform and the role that traditionally used to be played by the government. We've seen this with who's allowed to drive a taxi. We've seen sort of questions raised about what system of rules should best sort of keep short-term accommodation sort of safe. And the platforms have stepped up to the plate and said, we're going to create there's nothing that exists here, so we're going to create a way to make this work.
Yes.
And but sometimes that sort of these new business models don't fit into the
minimum
old
standards that used to be set by regulatory authorities now may be within the ambit of the platforms to do. And I should just quickly ask, say, Nathan, if my treehouse has some real loose planks in it, and we've already lost one relative through it, but it was fine. If I put that in the listing and just say, beware, there's a loose plank, it's marked with a red line, the kind of thing that the Holiday Inn would not let that room, is that okay? Is that just part of the democratization? Or would you say, no, there's certain minimum standards, even if it's disclosed, and we wouldn't want to list it otherwise?
I think transparency and expectation setting is critical, because I don't think it's usually black or white. There's a full spectrum of kind of risk and hazards that might crop up. And so, of course, communicating that up front, the Best Western or whatever, traditional brand probably wouldn't let you have a treehouse in the first place.
Yes.
Because there's not a railing on the ladder, something like that. What we have done to protect consumers is now personal liability insurance, which is included in every transaction. It's not something you have to check a box and pay extra for, but in about 20 countries, including the US, if you fall through that board or step on a nail, you're going to be covered by an insurance product that we include as part of your booking. Now, statistics show that that is incredibly unlikely. That hasn't happened before. But if anything like that were to happen, there are safety nets in place.
But this is right to Arun's point that here it is then, even in the ideal, the market setting the standards rather than a regulator doing the same. And I guess, Susan, it's worth asking you on the content side, to what extent do you feel YouTube as a platform and a community has a role to say this particular video does not reflect YouTube values versus, hey, people want to put it on, if they're entertained by it and it's not illegal, let's just have it clearly marked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so definitely there are certain standards that we have from a content perspective of content that we don't want to have on YouTube and that we don't want to have part of our community. So, for example, anything that would be inciting violence, hate speech would be another example. And so adult content, right? Those have all been decisions that we've made early on because that is content that that we don't believe is part of the community that we want associated with YouTube. And so we actually, the interesting thing is that the way that we detect that content is we actually rely on our users to flag it for us. So every video has an opportunity for a user to select flag, and then it goes to a set of people at YouTube that review that and decide whether or not it meets our policies or not.
And now Nathan gave plenty of statistics about Airbnb use. Just roughly, how many YouTube videos are uploaded every day, just roughly?
Well, we count it in hours of video, so we have 400 hours uploaded every minute. So I don't know what that translates to into actual numbers, but it's a very, very significant number. And so when you're dealing with numbers of that scale, we basically have to rely upon the community to be able to identify the videos that are a problem and to be able to pull those down really quickly.
And once it's flagged, as you say, it gets reviewed, roughly how many people check into work, or maybe they telecommute, and just watch flagged videos all day long?
Well, I don't know the number, but I mean, we try to have enough people that we can, we make sure that we meet certain standards
Yes.
of being able to pull it down really quickly, depending upon the category of
Yes.
the content that is pulled down really quickly. So something that would be really a problem should get pulled down within an hour. Just content that someone might have said is a problem, definitely pulled down within 24 hours.
And I think that, I think the points that Nate and Susan raise highlight the fact that we can't imagine a world in which, if a lot of commerce is flowing through platforms, that there's a government regulator who is doing all the things that a regulator used to have to do, sort of like preventing market failure. The platforms are generally in a much better position, and so we have to sort of come up with systems in which the platforms sort of are the entity to which you sort of delegate some of that responsibility. You let
Wow.
them use machine learning and the massive sort of data flows that they have to actually set the standards and enforce them.
Yes.
And that requires sort of coming up with a much greater level of trust in
Yes.
platforms over time.
Let me get our other two panelists
Yep.
into the conversation first. Chuck Robbins, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I am very well, thank you.
I like your tie, by the way.
I appreciate that. Flattery may get you somewhere. But you are the CEO of Cisco. Cisco is one of those brands that's ubiquitous, but does have that kind of wholesale flair to it. And when we think of then the two kinds of platforms we opened with, you guys are part of the network that are custodians of the generative internet on which all this stuff is built. And so here's an open-ended question. How's it going down there? How's the internet doing?
We're the collective hallucination, is that what you
Yes,
said?
yes.
It's fascinating. I've been listening to the discussions, and I thought about a few things. Number one, I think we built the platforms that enable these platforms. And,
Yes.
everything we're talking about this week in Davos is something that we've been talking about for about 8 years, and it's just phenomenal to see it come to life. The other thing I thought about is that we actually embraced, I think, the power of creating a platform even 15 years ago, because as I think about what you do is you create an ecosystem where value is shared across. There's tremendous benefit. You create loyalty. You create stickiness. And I thought about one of the decisions we made early on that I think has differentiated us in similar ways, in that back in the probably about 15, 16 years ago, we made a decision to really think about a global ecosystem around the platforms that we were building. So even today, we deliver all of our solutions through an ecosystem of hundreds of thousands of people that get up every day and they derive value from being a part of this interconnected system.
Is there a specific example, like a day in the life of a bit moving along the internet or something?
Well, I think the issue is that our platforms, while we like to think that it's everything you need, there's usually other stuff that comes with it to actually enable what you guys ultimately try to do and what our customers try to do. But what we created was an ecosystem of value exchange. So partners integrate our solutions, they build applications on top of our solutions. We then subsequently created a set of certifications that created a broader ecosystem of loyalty and again, value exchange where people built careers. So it's an interesting correlation to the economic and the benefit that you see from what you've done.
But just help us out here for a moment. Is what you're thinking about routers, the basic building blocks that move a bit in the right direction when it could go in two different directions, it picks the right one? Are those the sorts of building blocks you're thinking of or something else?
Well, I'm thinking about the networking infrastructure that runs the underlying internet, clearly.
Yes.
But the collaboration capabilities, the security technology, the mobility infrastructure that goes into service provider networks, all of that is part of this broad ecosystem that delivers it every day. And then we even subsequently created a global educational network called Network Academies to create more people who are able to be a part of this ecosystem. So
Yes.
now we're transitioning all of our platforms to be of the flavor that you described. So we're opening up programmability on everything we build so that you can then develop on top of it, add value, build businesses on top of it, et cetera. So it's a similar
Yes.
transition.
And the kinds of constraints they were talking about as platform operators, where there's stuff that YouTube has community guidelines, it doesn't quite work, or Airbnb may yet someday find the lighthouse so dangerous it will not list it. Although I did see a lighthouse listed on Airbnb. It looked very good until in the fine print of the listing it said, it came with earplugs because if it's foggy, the lighthouse has a 400 decibel horn on top that
It's part of the experience. What do you expect? It's the lighthouse.
Exactly. But is it that you're more in the engineering part of the infrastructure? So how Cisco technologies are used is less something that would be Cisco's responsibility, or is there an analogy to the sorts of decisions that Susan and Nathan make?
I think if you asked our customers when we have challenges, they think it's very much our responsibility. So we have it's a different form of responsibility, but we believe that as we move to a world that we're talking about here in Davos of digitization, we think that creating an ecosystem that has the ability to dynamically engage with the technology, even the technology we build is quite similar. So, people don't know this, but we have close to 1 million developers that are actually writing applications that interact with our portfolio today. So
And those are developers that are not employed by you.
That's correct.
They're just people out in the world that write something.
They're writing higher level security applications that take advantage of our security portfolio, or we have collaboration solutions that we have developers that are building, third-party applications that'll place calls into the
Yes.
the capabilities. So it's, you could see an Airbnb actually connect with our collaboration portfolio and initiate a video call within your application for customer support or something of that nature. So it's all coming together.
And is this your vision as well for the Internet of Things we've been hearing so much about?
Well, I think that what we talk about what's going on here in Davos, every business, the strategy of every business is going to have technology at the core, right? We've gone through this phase where every customer, every company, every country knows that technology has to enable your strategy. And now,
Yes.
I think what many of our colleagues here have proven is that technology will fundamentally define differentiated business models and differentiated business strategies of the future.
Yes.
And so whether I'm looking at my friend Dr. Dinner on the front row here with Bosch that we've been engaged with, who's looking at how technology enables him to change the business model of how he engages with the consumer around the technology that he sells into the home. And I think those are the kinds of things that we're going to continue to see. And to the extent that the underlying technology can be modified or adapted based on the data flowing out of different objects, we think that has value and creates greater insights for our customers.
And do you see that as the kind of platform that would be unowned, like the internet itself? Objects might talk to other objects. Developers can write some pipe between a tea kettle and a shovel out front. So when you're done shoveling, the kettle turns on. Or is it the kind of thing that would be, that's an idea you can have. Or is it the kind of idea that there would be, through network effects, maybe one company that synthesizes it all together the way that maybe you have an Airbnb synthesizing between
No,
people?
I think the power of what has been created with the internet is someone owns every piece of equipment that actually connects, right? Someone
Yes.
has title to it eventually. But this interoperable sort of open ecosystem of technology has created a bit of a democratization of capabilities around the world. You layer onto it broadband and the capabilities, and I think you do have the opportunity. I personally am an optimist as well, and I believe that all of this technology and everything that we do, I think we're on the fundamental front edge of really being able to solve some of the world's largest problems because of the technology innovation that we've seen, both with access as well as the notion of platforms and sensors and all the things that are coming. So
Yes.
I think it'll continue to. We're going to go from 18 billion connected devices today to 50 billion in 2020 and perhaps 500 billion in 2030. So that's a massive network effect.
Many more devices than people.
Yes.
Pierre Nanterme, from Accenture, which
Indeed.
I believe has no headquarters. Accenture is in fact a totally distributed organization, is that
Totally
right?
distributed, virtual and digital.
Do you know where you're going after the conference is over, or just sort of wherever the cheapest flight is?
And maybe you might talk to my hologram.
He's going to get on Airbnb.
So touch me. Touch
That's
me.
right, Airbnb.
Might not be me.
Yes, yes. So you've been listening to this conversation, and interesting threads here starting to develop around competition, or whether there's a need for competition, where the regulatory thing kicks in. Susan's story of Google Video realizing time to get YouTube. What do you see either in the analog world happening, not just with tech companies, and what's your sense about the way in which companies relate to one another if they're trying to do something interoperable? Does that mean the competitors are not competing? What's your sense of this?
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a very interesting world where we are indeed at Accenture when we're serving our clients in their digital transformation of their analog business, if you
Yes.
will, of their current business, on how you emulate this platform concept,
Yes.
how you leverage the technology of the different technology providers, including our friend from Cisco, to create a platform economy more around the industry. So here we talked a lot around platforms that could be used by you, me, consumers, to platforms which are more in the B2B environment. And this week, we are disclosing our 2016 technology vision, and it's going to be on the platform economy. And interestingly, just to give you some data and some facts, 80% of the executive we surveyed in that research mentioned that indeed platform going to be key in their growth strategy moving forward. That's the point number one. 75% confirm that indeed the industry boundaries going to be blurred. And to your point, they will have to cooperate inside their industry and even outside the industry on a cross-industry standpoint. And only 30, but already 30% are already building platforms. And it has been confirmed with an IDC research that is mentioning that in 16, probably 100 industry-based platforms will come live. So maybe your next question might be, tell us more about these industry platforms. Yes.
It might be, but
Yes.
hold that thought for a moment.
Now, let me share with you the three, because I guess it's interesting to see and to leverage
All
what's
right,
going
quickly, yes.
on. Quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one, the three clearly are platforms within a company,
Yes,
platform within an industry,
yes,
and platform we're going to create cross-industry. So you see now
Yes.
a very clear typology of these different platforms, clearly enabled by the Internet of Things and digital
Yes.
technologies. We're going to change dramatically the way the business is operating.
Well, let me throw out a question then based on exactly that taxonomy you put out, which is, let's take an example of something probably common to almost any platform that's being built, especially one that's trying to bring strangers together in different ways, and that is reputation. Airbnb, I gather, has reputations that develop. That's part of the services Airbnb is offering. YouTube has some sense of rating and flagging. And I imagine, Chuck, you've got those developers. Some of them might be up to no good. I don't know the extent to which there is reputation developing among those developers. But that could either be within each platform. I may have a terrible Airbnb reputation, but on YouTube I'm gold. Or do you see the idea of something emerging that would be a reputation you garner as a human, and you can bring that to any platform for better or worse? Is this a great vision or a terrible one? Or, I don't know. Susan, yes.
Well, I'm not sure it's such a great idea. I mean,
You're
I
the
think,
Mark Cuban in this scenario.
Yes, I'm the Mark Cuban, exactly.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we have for our creators is the number of subscribers that they have. And so, or the number of views that they've had, right? So creators will say, I have 10 million subscribers, or I have a video that was seen 100 million times, right? And so that's like a specific measurement of how successful was their work in terms of being an entertainer. And I don't think that's really relevant if they would be good at hosting people in their house. Like, they might be, but they might not be. And so correlating those two metrics, I think, is not going to be that useful.
So the reputation you're thinking about is very specific, but of course in the taxonomy Pierre was talking about, there was also cross within an industry. So if there's another competing video platform, I don't know, Vimeo, you name it, could you imagine it being full faith and credit that my YouTube views I can bring over to Vimeo and garner an audience more quickly, or vice versa? Or does that just seem more trouble than it's worth? I do not sense excitement here.
Yeah.
It might be that I'm talking to YouTube now.
I
yes.
think it would be complicated to implement. And but you know, I'm not saying like there aren't some. You know, I think some places it's very useful. For example, is like credit. We use that right now for credit cards, right? Like every single place that you go, you have a credit score, and you can use that because that's universal. It's universal that if I paid in one place, like I'm probably going to pay in another. And so I think.
And if you have a lot of YouTube views, you're probably a deadbeat. Sorry, I was.
Well, you might be a good. Well, yeah. Well, so if you're a YouTuber and you're great, you're right. Like maybe you would be useful on other platforms too. But you know, different people have different mediums, right? Like people who are classical violinists are not necessarily great, you know, rock violinists. Like so I think we have to think about what are the universal applications and what are the things that we can take across platform, as opposed to saying, oh no, we're going to have this one size fits all, and it's going to judge you.
Your reputation
all the time.
as a human
and your
is a
reputation is
6 or
just one
something,
thing, and it all
right.
relates in this one area. I think people would find that scary, and also as a platform, not that useful. Like it's not really that useful to me whether or not.
Yes.
Like they own a lighthouse or a tree house or a regular house.
Yes, I've just been thinking about the Uber driver that wants to move to Lyft. Could you take your reputation with you or something? But Nathan, you've got a view on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tempting idea, but I think it's harder than it sounds because first, getting the business model to make sense around that, I think is a real challenge. How to normalize reputation in a shareable way, I think is a real challenge. And then data privacy issues.
Yes.
On the one hand, the idea behind sharing reputation is to make it seamless. On the other hand, people don't like their data seamlessly being shared.
Yes.
So I think that's also a
so
real
your
thing that has
first
to be
worry
balanced.
is how hard it would be to make it work, and your second worry is what if it works? Which makes it sound like it's not a great idea either way.
I just think it gets really tricky.
Pierre?
Yeah, no, I guess it's maybe a profound idea, but probably a bit complicated for the reason we discussed. And what we see more is people building a platform or participating to a platform because you can own, indeed, the values, the content. Something which is, of course, extremely important in the platform economy is the cybersecurity and the security boundaries you're going to put inside. So starting to have platform cooperating between each other would be probably technically reasonably complex, but probably would create enormous complexities in terms of how you ensure the integrity of the information, the data protection, the data integrity, the data privacy that's going to be set in each of the platforms. So what we see more, for instance, in life science, is today we built a platform around predictive analytics where you can access to anonymize patient data. We're doing that in the US with 50 million patients gathering 250 billion data anonymized, where the labs and the pharma players can access to this anonymized information.
Yes.
That's very important, and create their own algorithm, but they are sharing this anonymized data, so they can move more rapidly to the information, and then they can keep their algorithm on their own. This is more the kind of services we see, and we are custodian of the security, of the way the platform going to work, of the architecture, and of all the integrity of the system. If you're starting to share that with another platform, then it's going to be extraordinarily complicated.
A diffusion of responsibility.
Because, I mean, the word been mentioned, you need at the end of the day to be accountable for the outcome you're delivering from the platform. And someone will have to be accountable. If it's an actionable platform, it's going to be us ensuring the end-to-end integrity of the process.
Yes. I'd like to open it up to comments, questions, thoughts from our audience.
There you go. To your left.
To my left. Right here. Please feel free to tell us who you are.
Yeah, Trond Bettestuen. I work for a Norwegian bank, small bank. A question for Airbnb. When will you start to sell homes?
When will you start to sell homes?
Right. So the question is, when will we start to sell homes? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think soon, because I don't think it plays to our strength. I mean, the power of the Airbnb platform is that we're allowing so many people to participate that we don't have to actually go buy homes, pour concrete. And so I think as we think about growth, it's going to be about kind of leveraging kind of that advantage, that uniqueness in our business model, as opposed to kind of going in a more traditional direction of real estate acquisition.
Which is a neat, real question about, if you're a platform, what's the boundary of your platform? When do you say, hey, let's just keep doing what we're doing versus get into other things? And Susan, that might be a good question to ask you, given, as Google goes to Alphabet, is there anything Google won't do? There's at least 26 things, I guess, in the English alphabet. But
yeah, I mean, I think we're just being a platform provider. I think the power of being a platform provider is that we can make all the people who develop on top of us more efficient. They don't need to worry about getting an audience. They don't need to develop about video streaming or developing a player or finding their next new audience or the rating system, right? They don't need to worry about any of that. And so just enabling the platform to be better